Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Eh bien, écoutez, ravi de vous avoir avec nous. Est-ce que tout le monde a eu le temps de scanner le code barre pour avoir la traduction ou est-ce qu'il est nécessaire qu'on vous le remette? Voilà, c'est fait. Donc, vous pouvez scanner. Nos intervenants vont nous parler en anglais. Et donc, nous avons une traduction simultanée que vous pouvez avoir sur vos iPhones à partir de ce scan. Et pour ceux qui n'ont pas d'écouteurs, la régie peut vous prêter des écouteurs. Donc si c'est le cas, je ne sais pas en régie comment on opère, mais voilà, peut-être lever le doigt ceux qui ont besoin d'écouteurs. On va laisser quelques minutes le temps que chacun puisse scanner le QR code. Et je ne sais pas en régie si vous avez la possibilité de l'afficher quelque part pour quand les personnes retardataires vont arriver, ils puissent le scanner et avoir la traduction simultanée. Wayne, very good. Oui, c'est ça. Wait.
You.
It's very fine. Wayne, you can sit somewhere here, close to Eileen here. Encore quelques minutes pour être opérationnel. Et puis nous allons commencer cette séance qui va durer 3 heures sur la construction hors site. Et donc on est heureux de vous avoir tous ici pour vous parler de construction hors site. Aujourd'hui, donc, nous allons avoir des interventions d'experts de la construction hors site qui nous viennent de Suède. J'ai à côté de moi Niklas, Suzanne et Michael, qui se présenteront un petit peu plus largement tout à l'heure. Et puis nous aurons ensuite Wayne, qui nous vient d'Angleterre, et puis Eileen, qui nous vient de Paris. Et donc nous allons passer ces 3 heures à essayer de vous montrer à quel point la construction hors site est intéressante de tout plein de points de vue. Bien sûr, premièrement, sur le sujet de réponse aux enjeux environnementaux, mais aussi sur les sujets sociétaux, sociaux, par l'amélioration de la productivité. Alors peut-être, pour commencer, je m'appelle Pascal Chazal et j'ai créé, il y a 5 ans, après 30 années de construction bois, j'ai créé le groupe hors site pour amener en France un nouvel écosystème de la construction hors site qui était en train de se développer dans le reste du monde, mais qui n'était pas véritablement apparu en France. Et c'est un écosystème d'acteurs qui se réunissent pour penser industrialisation de la construction. Et cet écosystème, on a voulu l'amener en France. Et donc nous avons commencé par la création du magazine hors site, que vous pouvez trouver un peu partout sur Batimat. Vous trouvez le numéro 19. Et donc, on l'a créé il y a 5 ans, en 2017. Ensuite, on s'est rendu compte d'une chose, c'est qu'on est soit formé au métier du bâtiment, et puis on va terminer sur un chantier ou dans un bureau d'études, mais on pense bâtiment, ou on est formé à l'industrie, et puis on termine dans des usines qui fabriquent des avions, des autos, des machines à laver, mais pas des produits pour le bâtiment. Et donc, on s'est dit qu'il manquait en fait de la formation dans ce domaine, parce que la construction hors site, finalement, se trouve à mi-chemin entre le monde de l'industrie et le monde du bâtiment. Et donc, il faut des formations spécifiques qui viennent bien sûr en plus des formations classiques qu'on peut avoir d'architectes, d'ingénieurs ou autres. Et donc, nous avons créé le campus hors site, qui est la première école en France dédiée à la construction hors site. C'est une école d'abord en ligne que vous pouvez, sur laquelle vous pouvez parcourir des parcours de formation gratuitement sur la plateforme web, mais c'est aussi des formations en présentiel qui permettent en fait de mieux comprendre qu'est-ce que c'est que la construction hors site. Et puis troisièmement, nous avons créé également un cabinet de conseil qui s'appelle Hors Site Conseil. Et ce cabinet accompagne les acteurs, on va dire du côté de l'amont, des maîtres d'ouvrage qui, ayant de plus en plus de difficultés à construire sur le chantier, se tournent vers la construction hors site. Et donc on les accompagne à mieux comprendre ce que ça veut dire et surtout à mettre en place l'organisation qui va permettre de réussir avec de la construction hors site. Et puis on accompagne également les acteurs de l'industrie. Il y a des industriels nombreux qui sont en train de mettre en place des outils de production. Et donc on les accompagne également à aller vers le marché. Alors la construction hors site se développe énormément. Vous voyez, il y a 4 salons dédiés à la construction hors site en l'espace de 4 semaines. Il y en avait un il y a 2 semaines à Coventry en Angleterre. Alors il faut savoir qu'en Angleterre, on a au moins 2 salons par an sur la construction hors site. Ce sont des salons très importants, il y a au moins une centaine d'acteurs. Nous avons pour la 2e édition le salon hors site ici à Batimat. La première année, c'était 2019. Cette année, on a 3 fois plus d'exposants, 3 fois plus de surface. Et le hors site est devenu un secteur à part entière de Batimat. Ensuite, il y a le préfab aux Pays-Bas. Et puis, il y a le sommet européen du Modular Building Institute à Barcelone. Donc, vous voyez, la construction hors site est en train d'arriver en masse dans de nombreux pays. On le voit arriver aux États-Unis avec des investissements très forts de la part des acteurs de la tech comme Google, Facebook, Amazon. Le dernier en date, c'est Elon Musk qui vient d'investir dans des usines de construction modulaire. On a des développements très forts en Angleterre. On va en parler beaucoup parce que l'Angleterre a un peu d'avance sur nous dans le domaine. C'est bien sûr l'Asie, c'est bien sûr le Japon, l'Australie, mais c'est aussi chez nous. Et vous allez voir que la construction hors site en France est en train de se développer de manière importante. Ce nouvel écosystème qu'on a essayé de créer depuis 2017, eh bien, en fait, se développe. La création du magazine en 2017, on a créé également des voyages d'études. Il y en a eu 2 en 2018. Ensuite, donc 2019, ça a été la création du campus hors site. Ça a été la création du premier salon Batimat. Et puis également le lancement du premier baromètre de la construction hors site, dont je vous parlerai tout à l'heure. 2020, bien sûr, raison Covid, on a seulement réussi à faire un colloque. Et puis 2021, c'est vraiment reparti avec le rapport sur la construction hors site Rivaton-Michel. On a également un master qui a été lancé par le CESI sur la construction hors site. Et puis la certification QB modulaire qui a été lancé par l'ACIM, qui est le syndicat de la construction modulaire, et puis le CSTB. Et donc aujourd'hui, en 2022, nous sommes à la 2e édition du salon hors site. Le baromètre version numéro 2 va être lancé. On est en train de travailler à l'écriture d'un référentiel de la construction hors site. Ça existe dans d'autres pays et ça nous semblait nécessaire de créer un référentiel pour savoir de quoi on parle. Après tout, c'est quoi le hors site ? Et puis, l'AIMCC et donc le Conseil stratégique de filière a réuni un groupe d'experts pour écrire un livre blanc sur la construction hors site afin de sensibiliser l'ensemble des acteurs à la construction hors site, notamment les élus, les politiques, à comprendre tout l'intérêt qu'on a à construire en usine. Et j'ai en primeur quelques exemplaires de ce livre blanc ici avec moi maintenant. Ça, c'est le baromètre donc, qui a eu lieu en 2019. Vous voyez, aujourd'hui, on a questionné 200 acteurs, à peu près la moitié de maîtres d'ouvrage et la moitié de maîtres d'œuvre. Et 76% à l'époque, en 2019, on saura bientôt ce qu'ils en pensent aujourd'hui, mais on pense que ça va encore augmenter. Déjà, 67% des utilisateurs pensent que la part de la construction hors site va augmenter sensiblement. L'offre se développe également. Vous savez, c'est toujours l'histoire de l'œuf et de la poule. Comment est-ce que je peux avoir l'industriel capable de bien répondre à mes attentes quand je suis maître d'ouvrage? Eh bien, l'industriel, il a du mal à exister si le marché n'existe pas. Donc, en ce moment, on voit une demande qui est en train de grimper, très forte, de plus en plus forte, mais on voit aussi des acteurs qui sont en train de se développer, de se créer. On a des start-up, on a des groupes industriels. Tout ça est en train d'avancer pour essayer de répondre à la demande qui est en train de naître. Le sujet, il est bien sûr climatique et environnemental. Vous avez tous vu cette jeune femme qui s'est permis d'arrêter un match de tennis à Roland-Garros et qui nous alerte tous sur la nécessité d'aller beaucoup plus vite sur la transformation environnementale. Les enjeux, on les connaît tous. On vient de vivre un été absolument ahurissant. Donc il s'agit maintenant d'arrêter les belles paroles, mais d'agir très vite, d'accélérer le mouvement. Et la construction hors site est vraiment un sujet très intéressant où on peut améliorer les choses sur le plan environnemental, réduction de l'impact carbone. La culture de l'immobilier, depuis l'après-guerre et dans de très nombreux pays, si ce n'est pas l'ensemble des pays, c'est le béton. Le béton, c'est un matériau absolument fantastique, qui coûte pas cher, qui répond bien aux problèmes structuraux, qui répond bien aux problèmes de feu, qui répond bien aux problèmes d'acoustique. Et depuis la guerre, en fait, d'ailleurs le Guardian avait titré « Le béton a sauvé le monde après-guerre » parce qu'il y avait tellement à reconstruire qu'on ne sait pas comment on aurait fait si on n'avait pas eu le béton. Maintenant, il menace de le détruire parce que le béton, c'est 8% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. C'est 3 fois plus que l'aviation dans son ensemble. Alors, on n'en parle pas beaucoup, on parle beaucoup des avions, mais le béton, c'est 3 fois plus de dégagement de CO2 que l'aviation dans son ensemble. Donc, il faut travailler à réduire l'impact environnemental de la construction. Bien sûr, la première des choses, c'est de travailler sur les matériaux, essayer de travailler avec des matériaux qui vont être biosourcés, qui vont être renouvelables, qui vont être recyclables. On ne va pas se passer du béton, on est tous d'accord là-dessus, on va continuer à travailler avec du béton, mais il faut apprendre à en utiliser moins. Il faut aussi apprendre, bien sûr, à le rendre moins émetteur de gaz à effet de serre, et tout le monde travaille sur ce sujet-là. Mais la deuxième chose qui peut nous permettre de réduire notre impact environnemental, au-delà des matériaux, ce sont les process. Et c'est bien le sujet de la construction hors site. La construction hors site, ce n'est pas une histoire de matériaux, c'est une histoire de process. Comment est-ce qu'on améliore nos process pour être tous ensemble plus efficaces? Alors vous savez, nos bâtiments, ils ont énormément évolué. Et en 40 ans, on peut dire qu'il y a eu une bascule complète sur les grandes masses. Un bâtiment, il y a 40 ans, c'était à peu près 70% de gros œuvres. Alors là, on remonte jusqu'à l'Empire State Building parce que tout le monde connaît, c'est remarquable. 70% de gros œuvres, 30% de lots techniques et architecturaux. Et vous voyez, l'Empire State Building, c'était 13 mois de travaux. Ça paraît complètement ahurissant. Mais on avait la même chose ici à Paris, à La Défense. On était capable de construire des tours en l'espace d'une année. Aujourd'hui, les masses se sont complètement inversées. Le gros œuvre ne représente plus que 30%. Et on a 70% de lots techniques, architecturaux, complexes que l'on doit réaliser sur le chantier. Puisqu'on coule le béton sur le chantier, bien, tout le reste doit se faire sur le chantier. Et finalement, cette complexité des bâtiments, j'ai un petit peu l'impression qu'on est passé à côté, que finalement, on cherche à construire aujourd'hui des bâtiments d'une très grande complexité, avec les mêmes méthodes et les mêmes organisations qui marchaient très bien quand ils étaient simples. Et ça devient de plus en plus compliqué. Et le résultat, c'est une chute très importante de la productivité. Vous savez que dans le monde de l'industrie, mais pas que, la pêche, l'agriculture, la médecine, la pharmacie, on a des accroissements de productivité qui sont tout à fait significatifs. Les industries de l'automobile, par exemple, ont des améliorations de productivité de l'ordre de 2% par an. C'est tout à fait considérable. Et en tant que consommateur, bien sûr, on peut l'apprécier puisqu'on voit nos voitures, par exemple, devenir de plus en plus extraordinaires et de plus en plus accessible financièrement. Le monde du bâtiment n'a pas subi cette transformation, ni industrielle, ni digitale. On a tous des ordinateurs tout autour de nous, mais on est loin d'avoir appris à les utiliser comme c'est le cas dans l'industrie. Le résultat, c'est que notre productivité, elle est en train de chuter. Elle a chuté de 20% en 20 ans. Donc pour être simple, un ouvrier qui ramenait 100 € de valeur ajoutée il y a 20 ans ne ramène plus que 80 € aujourd'hui. Ça se traduit bien sûr, cette baisse de productivité, par une baisse de la qualité, par une augmentation des délais, une augmentation des coûts et une réduction des marges des entreprises. On a de très nombreuses entreprises aujourd'hui qui sont sur le fil du rasoir. La moyenne des entreprises à la FFB aujourd'hui gagne entre 1,3 et 1,5% de résultats nets à la fin de l'année. Ce n'est pas du tout suffisant. Ce n'est pas du tout suffisant pour investir, ce n'est pas du tout suffisant pour former et pour travailler dans des conditions optimum. Dans l'industrie, il n'est pas rare qu'on trouve des résultats d'une dizaine de pourcents, ce qui permet aux entreprises de pouvoir vivre sainement. Donc, de par le monde, on a de très nombreux acteurs qui pensent qu'on ne va plus pouvoir continuer à travailler ainsi, à tout faire sur le chantier, et qu'une des idées serait de transférer des tâches, de transférer des heures dans des ateliers et dans des usines. Finalement, l'idée de la construction hors site, c'est celle-ci. C'est je transfère des heures du chantier dans un atelier, dans une usine. Pourquoi? Parce que dans un atelier, dans une usine, je vais pouvoir avoir des conditions de travail infiniment meilleures que toutes celles que je vais pouvoir trouver sur un chantier. Et il y a deux chiffres que je vais vous montrer qui, en général, font tomber à la renverse les gens de la construction et de l'immobilier. C'est la comparaison de ce qu'on appelle l'efficience d'un ouvrier. L'efficience d'un ouvrier, c'est le rapport entre le nombre d'heures pour lequel il est payé et le nombre d'heures pour lequel il fait de la valeur ajoutée. Dans une usine, un ouvrier fait de la valeur ajoutée à peu près 80% de son temps. Tout est organisé autour de son poste de travail pour qu'il soit particulièrement efficace. Vous voyez ici le monsieur qui est à droite, il est assis sur un tabouret qui est un exosquelette et qui va lui permettre de se déplacer pour aller chercher une pièce juste à côté. Sur un chantier, et donc j'ai pas fini, un ouvrier dans une usine a un taux d'efficience de 80%. Ça veut dire qu'il y a seulement 20% de son temps, quelque part, qui n'apporte pas de la valeur ajoutée. Alors vous voyez le chiffre sur un chantier, 20% du temps d'un ouvrier apporte de la valeur ajoutée. Alors bien sûr, les ouvriers, ils n'ont pas l'impression de travailler 20% de leur temps, hein. Mais déjà, le chantier, il faut qu'ils y arrivent. En moyenne, les ouvriers, ils habitent à 80 km de leur chantier. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils habitent là où ils habitent et le chantier, il est là où il est. Donc je me déplace pour m'y rendre. Quand je suis sur le chantier, si je suis plombier, je fais une salle de bain au 5e étage, la première des choses que je fais, c'est que je me rends dans la salle de bain, qui est donc mon poste de travail. Je vais commencer par amener mes outils, parce que si je les laisse sur les chantiers, on va me les piquer. Ensuite, je redescends pour chercher la baignoire. Et puis, je remonte, et puis je vais chercher le lavabo. Puis quand je remonte et j'ouvre le carton, je me rends compte que je n'ai pas le bon modèle. Il y a une erreur de référence. Donc, je repars pour en chercher un. Est-ce que ça vous parle? Le résultat, c'est que la valeur ajoutée d'un ouvrier sur un chantier, c'est 20%. Ça a été mesuré notamment par l'université de Aalto, en Finlande, qui a fait une étude pendant 2 ans sur des chantiers dans le monde entier et qui nous dit ça. Donc l'idée du hors-site, c'est vraiment de déplacer des heures dans une usine, dans un atelier, pour améliorer la productivité des ouvriers et bien sûr leurs conditions de travail. Alors par contre, c'est là où ça coince un petit peu, c'est que dans le bâtiment, on est dans des logiques de chantier, on est dans des logiques de prototype et on est persuadé que pour faire le meilleur bâtiment, quelque part, il faut le réinventer de la cave au grenier. Et c'est ce qu'on fait. L'industrie, ça repose sur 2 mots extrêmement simples, c'est la répétitivité et le volume. On va apprendre à faire des gestes simples et avec ces gestes simples, on va être capable de faire des produits extrêmement sophistiqués. Aujourd'hui, par exemple, les voitures sont fabriquées dans des usines où on ne retrouve pas de carrossiers, de mécaniciens. Ce sont des opérateurs industriels à qui on va apprendre à exécuter des tâches et on a les outils qui vont nous aider du lean manufacturing, du DFMA sur lequel je reviendrai largement tout à l'heure. Et bien sûr, tout ça repose sur un mot qui est le mot standardisation, qui est un mot il faut bien le dire, qu'on n'aime pas dans le monde de la construction. Alors, pour essayer de dédramatiser le terme de standardisation, vous allez voir en fait qu'on peut standardiser beaucoup de choses et qu'on est capable de faire des produits absolument uniques et spécifiques en utilisant de la standardisation. Et pour vous montrer ça, je vais vous montrer un petit, si ça veut marcher, dessin animé. Est-ce qu'on peut avoir le son ? Alors que ceux qui savaient que les dessins animés de Walt Disney étaient standardisés, lèvent la main. Vous n'êtes pas nombreux. Ça a fait le succès de Walt Disney et c'est utilisé bien sûr dans un nombre incroyable de domaines. Si on est capable de faire des dessins animés pendant 70 ans, standardisés et que personne ne s'en rend compte, peut-être on devrait être capable de faire des bâtiments avec, vous ne croyez pas ? Alors, la plupart des produits aujourd'hui sont fabriqués avec cette vision d'industrialisation et en fait, on va aller utiliser des composants pour fabriquer un produit. Il y a 40 ans, dans l'automobile, un fabricant comme Peugeot produisait pratiquement tous les composants et assemblait la voiture en totalité. D'ailleurs, dans le même groupe, on avait par exemple la 106 de Peugeot qui était fabriquée dans une usine et puis la Saxo qui était la même voiture. Dans une autre usine, il n'y avait quasiment pas une pièce en commun. Aujourd'hui, les industriels ont développé des savoir-faire et en fait, ils ne produisent plus qu'à peu près 25% de la voiture. Ils s'appuient sur ce qu'on appelle des équipementiers. Vous les connaissez, ils s'appellent Valeo, Forestia, Plasticolmium. Ce sont des entreprises incroyables qui se sont développées et qui sont capables de proposer dans le monde entier des composants à très très forte valeur ajoutée, à des prix tout à fait accessibles. Et ces équipements-là vont être intégrés dans la voiture d'une manière extrêmement rapide et efficace. Et c'est ce qui nous permet d'avoir les voitures qu'on a aujourd'hui. On fait exactement la même chose dans l'aéronautique. Est-ce que vous savez, par exemple, combien de temps il faut pour assembler un Airbus A320 aujourd'hui à Toulouse? Les Toulousains doivent le savoir. Il faut 2 jours. 2 jours pour assembler un Airbus A320. Pourquoi? Parce que l'ensemble des composants ont été fabriqués dans tout le reste de l'Europe, arrivent dans un hall d'assemblage et en l'espace de 2 jours, on a assemblé un Airbus A320. C'est bien sûr la même chose pour un téléphone. C'est bien sûr la même chose pour un programme informatique. On ne va pas coder tout le programme. On va aller chercher des briques de code qui ont été testées et approuvées. Ah, il y a un domaine dans lequel ça ne se passe pas pareil. C'est le bâtiment. Comment est-ce qu'on soit un bâtiment? À partir de matériaux finalement à faible valeur ajoutée et de beaucoup d'heures sur le chantier. Les matériaux les plus fortes valeurs ajoutées qu'on va trouver sur un chantier, c'est quoi? Ce sont les menuiseries, qui est un exemple extraordinaire d'industrialisation. Il y a 40 ans, les menuiseries étaient fabriquées par le menuisier du village. Aujourd'hui, elles sont fabriquées par des industriels. Ils savent faire du sur-mesure avec des process industriels parfaitement adaptés et qui nous permettent d'avoir des produits à des prix tout à fait intéressants et une qualité tout à fait intéressante. Donc, la question, c'est est-ce qu'on pourrait concevoir des bâtiments à partir de composants? A priori, pourquoi pas? Ça pourrait être des façades, ça pourrait être des salles de bain préfabriquées, ça pourrait être des systèmes de construction modulaires. Et c'est exactement le sujet, c'est apprendre à concevoir à partir de composants fabricables efficacement en usine qui vont nous permettre d'avoir des bâtiments plus efficaces et moins chers. Donc leur site va offrir énormément d'avantages. Les principaux, bien sûr, c'est la réduction du délai de chantier, puisqu'on transfère des heures dans le chantier. Donc, classiquement, on arrive très facilement à diviser par 2 le temps de chantier. On arrive à diviser d'une manière tout à fait phénoménale le nombre de camionnettes qui livrent le chantier. Vous savez qu'un chantier, c'est avant tout beaucoup de camionnettes. On va aussi améliorer les conditions de travail des ouvriers. On va donner de l'attractivité au secteur. Bref, on peut faire un petit peu son marché là-dedans, mais l'amélioration qui est apportée par leur site, elle est extrêmement large. La réduction de l'empreinte carbone est tout à fait considérable. D'abord, on va bien sûr utiliser plutôt des matériaux renouvelables ou recyclables. On va aussi mieux gérer les matériaux, parce que sur le chantier, vous savez qu'aujourd'hui, on livre des matériaux toujours un petit peu plus que prévu, parce qu'on a peur de manquer sur le chantier. Le résultat, c'est aujourd'hui 225 millions de tonnes de matériaux neufs qui terminent dans des bennes. Et quand on est dans une usine, on prend juste ce dont on a besoin. Et puis dans les bennes, on est capable de faire véritablement du recyclage, parce que dans une usine, on peut faire un tri bien plus important. La réduction du transport, ça peut aller jusqu'à 5 fois. Et puis réduction des besoins en énergie pour la construction et également pour l'exploitation, parce que fabriquer en usine va nous permettre d'améliorer considérablement la qualité des bâtiments et donc de réduire les besoins en énergie futurs. Et puis la construction hors site, il s'agit d'assembler des éléments. Donc on peut aussi penser qu'en fin de vie, on va pouvoir désassembler et donc rentrer dans de l'économie circulaire, qui est bien sûr excessivement intéressante. On a des exemples de réduction de l'impact carbone aujourd'hui qui vont jusqu'à 50%, notamment avec de la construction bois réalisée en usine avec des technologies d'aujourd'hui, par rapport à la même construction qui serait construite sur le chantier en béton. Donc vous voyez, on n'est pas en train de parler d'1 ou 2%, c'est des réductions qui sont absolument considérables. Le problème, c'est que le processus classique dans lequel nous sommes tous et qu'on a tous appris à l'école, il nous amène inévitablement sur le chantier. Ça part toujours d'une problématique que le foncier. Les maîtres d'ouvrage dépensent beaucoup d'énergie et d'argent pour avoir le bon foncier. Ensuite, il va falloir avoir un permis de construire. Donc, on va demander à l'architecte de faire un projet. Et le résultat, c'est qu'on a un bâtiment prototype à chaque fois. Et ça ne nous permet pas d'industrialiser, malheureusement. Donc, pour réussir l'industrialisation de la construction, il va falloir changer nos disques durs. Il faut passer d'une culture de chantier, qui est celle que nous avons tous aujourd'hui, avec également des organisations qui sont des organisations segmentées, et puis cette culture que nous avons de faire du sur-mesure à chaque fois, pour aller donc vers une culture industrielle qui va utiliser les outils de l'industrie, donc le fameux DFMA, donc Design for Manufacturing Assembly. Je dois concevoir pour être capable de fabriquer, ensuite d'assembler, et on rajoute le D maintenant parce qu'on veut désassembler en fin de vie. Il va falloir comprendre la notion de standard, apprendre à travailler plus dans des organisations collaboratives et quelque part, ça c'est un ouvrage de McKinsey qui dit qu'il faut passer de projet à produit. On est tous dans une démarche de projet, il faut apprendre à parler dans une démarche de produit, sinon l'industrie ne peut pas exister. Alors, il y a quelque chose qui est très important. Aujourd'hui, je pense que la plupart des acteurs ont compris qu'on ne pouvait plus tout faire sur le chantier et beaucoup se dirigent vers des ateliers, des usines, mais la plupart y vont avec une démarche de bâtiment. Et en fait, quand on y va avec une démarche de bâtiment, on va pouvoir faire ce qu'on appelle de la préfabrication. Donc en gros, l'équipe de maîtrise d'œuvre va concevoir le projet. Une fois que c'est bien conçu, on va lancer une consultation. Notre bâtiment, c'est un pur prototype. Et là, on va essayer de trouver l'industriel idéal qui va être capable de nous faire notre produit. Alors régulièrement, on me dit « Ah, mais les salles de bain préfabriquées, ça ne marche pas, c'est trop cher. » Ah ben, bien sûr, parce qu'il n'y en a pas une pareille dans ton bâtiment. Si par contre, et on va le voir tout à l'heure avec Wayne, si par contre, tu vas chercher une salle de bain dans un catalogue et que tu la poses sur ton plan, là, l'industriel, il va pouvoir être efficace et amener une bonne qualité et un bon prix. Donc en fait, avec la préfabrication, et il faut développer la préfabrication, qui est une démarche bâtiment, on peut améliorer le délai, on peut améliorer la qualité, mais on n'arrive pas à améliorer le coût. Et aujourd'hui, on a un grave besoin d'améliorer le coût de nos constructions et également de nos rénovations. Donc il faut basculer dans une vision industrielle qui est là pour le coup une approche produit. Donc les industriels développent leurs produits, les proposent sur le marché. L'architecte apprend à concevoir son projet en allant chercher des produits qu'on sait fabriquer efficacement en utilisant le DFMA. Et là, pour le coup, l'industriel peut mettre en place un véritable flux de production. Donc l'industrialisation, c'est un mot qu'on n'aime pas bien dans le bâtiment encore une fois, mais c'est là le véritable changement. Il ne faut également pas opposer le monde de l'industrie et du bâtiment. c'est pas blanc ou noir, c'est pas 0 ou 1. Un bâtiment sera toujours un mixte des deux, avec des éléments extrêmement spécifiques, parce qu'on est toujours dans un cas extrêmement spécifique. Et donc, l'idéal, c'est d'arriver quelque part à prendre le meilleur des deux. Les gens du bâtiment sont incroyables dans leur capacité à faire des choses spécifiques à chaque fois. Donc, ce qui est spécifique, faisons-le avec une approche bâtiment, il n'y a pas de problème. On peut même utiliser de la préfabrication pour le faire. Mais par contre, est-ce que dans nos bâtiments, on ne pourrait pas trouver des éléments qui sont des éléments plutôt répétitifs que l'on va pouvoir fabriquer efficacement en usine? Et quand on regarde de près, vous allez voir qu'on a beaucoup de choses qui sont assez répétitives dans ce qu'on fait tous les jours. Alors, je dirais qu'on peut construire le même bâtiment avec les deux approches. Et là, je vais vous montrer un exemple d'un projet que nous avons accompagné, d'un projet qui avait été initié pour faire de la construction bois modulaire, un bâtiment en R+7, très intéressant, c'est une résidence étudiant. Et puis, le maître d'ouvrage arrive au résultat de l'appel d'offres avec un budget beaucoup trop important. Et donc, il nous demande de travailler pour essayer d'améliorer les choses. Et donc, on leur a proposé d'accompagner le projet avec une vision de DFMA. Le DFMA, c'est quoi? C'est chercher à réduire le nombre de composants pour réduire le nombre d'heures et pour réduire les coûts et augmenter la qualité. Vous voyez ici, c'est un moteur électrique. Point de départ, j'ai 47 composants. Il me faut 22 minutes pour assembler mon moteur. Et bien, après un travail de réduction des composants avec le DFMA, on arrive à 12 composants et seulement 12 minutes. Et là, pour le coup, on a gagné, bien sûr, en prix. On a un moteur qui coûte beaucoup moins cher, mais qui sera également beaucoup plus fiable et beaucoup moins cher. C'est ce que nous avons fait sur ce bâtiment, où nous avions au départ une équipe qui avait travaillé avec finalement un processus bâtiment. L'équipe de maîtrise d'œuvre, très compétente, avait fait son travail comme d'habitude. Et puis en bout de course, c'était aller chercher un industriel pour fabriquer les modules. Et nous, quand on a regardé le bâtiment, on s'est rendu compte qu'en fait, il y avait 22 types de chambres différents. Alors que pour faire une résidence étudiante, normalement avec 3 ou 4, ça doit suffire. Et donc on a travaillé à la réduction du nombre de chambres pour arriver à seulement 4 types de chambres. Et on a relancé la consultation. Eh bien, figurez-vous qu'on a gagné 1 million d'euros. On n'a pas changé la façade, on n'a pas changé le programme, on a simplement amélioré le processus. Vous voyez la différence entre une démarche de bâtiment visant à la préfabrication et une démarche d'industrialisation. Donc le premier schéma, je suis comme d'habitude, je fais une esquisse, un APS, un APD, un pro, un DCE et je lance ma consultation. Et puis là, j'espère trouver le bon industriel. Est-ce que l'architecte connaît parfaitement les lignes de production des industriels? Pas beaucoup de chance. Donc, on ne va pas atteindre un bon résultat. Par contre, si dès le départ, dès que j'ai fait un APS, je commence à aller chercher mon industriel et je le choisis avant et je vais faire la PD avec lui, là, pour le coup, ça va marcher. Alors, bien sûr, ça va nous obliger à changer nos processus d'achat. En loi MOP, par exemple, c'est extrêmement difficile. Il faut aller plutôt vers la conception-réalisation, vers des marchés globaux ou des accords cadres sur des durées longues. Et c'est comme ça que certains pays ont beaucoup d'avance sur nous. L'Angleterre, par exemple, a lancé de nombreux accords cadres, notamment sur les écoles. Je crois qu'ils en sont au 5e accord cadre de plusieurs millions de livres. Le dernier, c'était 3 milliards de livres pour faire des écoles hors site. Et ici, vous avez un document qui a été écrit par l'Ordre des architectes anglais, qui s'appelle le RIBA, qui donc donne un ouvrage permettant aux architectes d'intégrer le DFMA dans leur travail. Comment est-ce que vous allez pouvoir concevoir pour la préfabrication et l'assemblage? Et vous voyez les étapes, donc l'esquisse, l'APS, l'APD et le pro. Et vous voyez par exemple que l'industriel est choisi tout de suite après l'APS et que nous avons ce qu'ils appellent le MMC Advisor, donc qui est le consultant hors site quelque part, qui dès le départ va travailler à l'architecte pour l'aider à guider sa conception. On peut presque tout construire hors site aujourd'hui, des maisons, des logements, des tours, des écoles, des hôpitaux. On peut aussi faire tout plein de composants, des gaines techniques, des balcons, des façades, notamment pour faire de la rénovation. Vous avez tous entendu parler de Energy Sprong. Energy Sprong, qui est donc la rénovation. On transforme des logements qui sont des passoires thermiques pour arriver à des logements énergie zéro en quelques semaines par la préfabrication de façades, de toitures, de modules d'énergie. Ce qui est remarquable, c'est que les Hollandais qui ont commencé il y a 10 ans ont réussi à diviser par 2 le coût de la rénovation en une dizaine d'années en utilisant un véritable process, notamment en utilisant le digital depuis le scan de l'existant jusqu'aux machines à commande numérique qui sont capables de produire les éléments. C'est tout à fait remarquable et ils ont réussi à le faire parce que ces acteurs-là se sont vraiment remis en question. Un exemple au Japon, les Japonais font de la construction modulaire depuis les années 60. Ils ont produit plus de 2 500 000 maisons. Les acteurs, ils s'appellent Toyota Homes. Donc c'est eux qui ont commencé. Et aujourd'hui, ils arrivent à des prouesses absolument extraordinaires. Ils sont par exemple capables de garantir leur maison comme ils garantissent leur voiture sur une durée de 60 ans. Et si vous avez envie de changer de maison, ils sont capables de vous démonter votre maison en l'espace d'une journée. Les modules vont repartir dans une usine de recyclage et ils vont recycler 80% des matériaux. Donc on est dans une parfaite économie circulaire. Les prouesses en Angleterre, je ne sais pas si vous avez une idée de ce qu'on est capable de faire, par exemple, avec de la construction modulaire. Mais vous avez devant vous des tours, 44 étages à gauche et 50 étages à droite qui ont été construits avec un empilage de modules. Voilà les chantiers en cours. Celle de gauche, donc la tour verte, c'est 546 logements, c'est 1500 modules. Le chantier a été divisé par 2. C'est plus d'1 an de gagné sur l'exploitation et bien sûr sur les nuisances de chantier. Le nombre de camions a été divisé par 5 et la réduction de l'impact carbone de 45%. Et ça, c'est une étude de l'université de Cambridge et de Napier qui nous le prouve et l'étude est en cours de finalisation. Et les Anglais nous disent, ils ont commencé une dizaine d'années, en fait, travailler en équipe. Ici, vous avez un contractant général, un fabricant de modules, un architecte et un promoteur qui travaillent en équipe depuis 10 ans pour réussir, collaborer et recommencer. Et aujourd'hui, c'est devenu quelque chose de courant en Angleterre que la construction hors site industrialisée. L'exemple suédois, mais on en parlera tout à l'heure avec mes voisins qui nous viennent de Suède. La Suède a véritablement transformé sa manière de construire et ils ont réussi à atteindre des prouesses tout à fait incroyables. Ici, nous avons Combo Us. Combo Us, c'est un regroupement de bailleurs sociaux qui n'arrivaient plus à construire il y a une quinzaine d'années dans les enveloppes budgétaires et qui ont mis la barre très haut en disant on veut baisser de 25% la construction et qui ont réussi à produire en 10 ans 10 000 logements 25% moins chers avec des systèmes de production hors site et qui lance aujourd'hui un nouvel accord cadre de 25 000 logements sur 6 ans avec le même objectif. Et puis des projets tout à fait étonnants, mais Suzanne va nous parler de ce projet de 20 étages tout à fait extraordinaire en Suède. Donc aujourd'hui, il faut prendre conscience qu'on peut construire autrement, qu'on peut remettre en question nos modes de faire. Il faut apprendre à penser préfabrication plus que chantier, et ce, dès le premier coup de crayon, en favorisant le mode collaboratif. Il ne faut surtout pas opposer le bâtiment à l'industrie, c'est prendre les meilleures choses des deux. Et ne pas oublier la courbe d'apprentissage. Ça ne se fera pas du jour au lendemain, mais on peut progresser. Et puis surtout, il faut éduquer. C'est notamment la leçon que j'ai retenue de nos amis suédois, qui, il y a 20 ans, ont commencé par ça, éduquer les acteurs politiques, les élus, les maires, à comprendre qu'on avait tous intérêt à transférer des heures du chantier dans une usine. Enfin, pour terminer, fabriquer en usine, ce n'est pas le plus difficile. Le plus difficile, c'est de mettre en place une culture et un management de projet qui va rendre possible l'industrialisation. Voilà, et donc, je terminerai juste avant, si c'est possible, je ne sais pas comment faire, ça va, c'est pas grave. J'ai une slide sur le campus hors site qui est dans le hall 1, stand R7, si je ne dis pas de bêtises. Juliane, directrice générale, est juste ici. Donc, on est à votre disposition pour vous aider à avancer vers la construction hors site. Donc, j'ai été très long. Je vais passer maintenant la parole à nos experts. Donc, Niklas Svensson, qui va nous parler de l'histoire en fait de la construction hors site en Suède. Ensuite Suzanne, Michael, et puis on terminera par Wayne qui nous vient d'Angleterre et Eline. Alors Niklas, en fait c'est très intéressant parce qu'il a suivi tout le parcours de la construction hors site. Et bien sûr, nous Français, on pense qu'en Scandinavie, on construit en bois depuis toujours. Et c'est vrai, sauf qu'après la dernière guerre, en fait, on s'est mis à construire en béton. Et la construction, notamment de logements collectifs en Suède, depuis l'après-guerre, c'est le béton. Et il y a simplement une vingtaine d'années où ils se sont dit, c'est quand même dommage, on a des ressources forestières importantes, on a un savoir-faire. Pourquoi est-ce qu'on ne se remet pas à construire en bois comme on savait le faire par le passé? Et donc en 20 ans, ils ont réussi à passer de 0 à 20% du logement collectif en bois, industrialisé, fabriqué dans des usines. Et donc c'est ce dont va nous parler Niklas. Et que je vous demande d'applaudir. So Niklas, so you are coming from Sweden. Is it working?
I hope
Good.
so. I
yes,
hope
it's
so.
working. So Niklas, you are coming from Sweden.
Yes,
and,
we're a whole pack from
yeah.
Sweden, yes.
And you have been for 20 years or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Working in timber frame construction
Yeah.
and in a Swedish council, wooden council.
That's right.
And when you started, there was not so much timber frame building for housing.
In some areas, zero.
Zero, yes, like us. And so
Yes.
it's really interesting for us to understand how you reach 20% now of timber and how you have done it on an industrial way of thinking.
At least I can show you how we started.
Please.
So today I'm basically representing history in a way. I think I will start with, you change picture on the green spot, yeah.
The big one, yeah.
To be a little bit short, I think one of my favorite comedians is Billy Crystal. What I'm about to tell you right now is not actually a joke, but it is anyway. Once he told a story about a man who visited his doctor, and the doctor said, "I have one good news and one bad news. And the good news is that you have 24 hours left to live." What? Is that supposed to be the good news? Yes, I forgot to call you yesterday. Perhaps that's not a joke in a way, because I think that leads on to the next picture. It's urgent, that's what I mean. It's urgent for all over Europe to be more efficient, to be more healthy about the planet. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit, mainly history. Therefore, I start with the Swedish Royal Palace. What's the picture of it does in this presentation? Well, it represents Swedish history. And the two things that are quite interesting about this building, it was constructed, as you see, between 1697 and 1754. And obviously, the royal family is working in this palace every day, mainly when they are not traveling around the world. But one of the things that is very interesting is that its framework is in wood from that part of our history. And the second thing is that the construction process was basically organized as we do it today. It hasn't changed since that period. And as you mentioned, Pascal, you touches that sort of area when you have your presentation. It hasn't changed at all. And therefore, I think it's very important to talk about the revolution in a sort of positive way, a kind of revolution which are based on industrialized processes because it will be necessary. And I think in Sweden, this red house with white walls is representing the vision of Sweden, but it's actually even more than that, because it's of the single-family houses in Sweden, 92% is out of wood, and basically 90% is made in a factory. So we have a long tradition, and that tradition started basically after the Second World War. So this is how it's really, we have new homes in Sweden. And together with multi-story houses, 20%, as you mentioned, is about 50% in Sweden today. And it should affect all policies. Everything should be changed in a way. Yeah. That's what I mean when I say revolution. And this is what the high politicians actually have understand today. It's important with wood, as Ursula von der Leyen from the EU Commission says in this quote. But I'm not sure that she has understand about industrial processes. We have to explain that, because it's a little bit more difficult to explain to the politicians. If we look at the history from the Second World War, I would say basically after the Second World War, of course it was necessary to produce houses for people to live in. And then the demands are slowly increasing, deliver good housing. Of course we had that probably in the 1960s and 70s and the 80s. Today we are in a situation to deliver good and climate smart housing, of course. But in the next decades, it will be even tougher than that. We have to be resource efficient as well. So political standpoints and issues, high demand on housing, 75% is being built in largest cities. Wood has a role as a climate change mitigator, and renewable material and shorter production and assembly time is necessary. We call it green light. Sorry, Susanne, I borrow that expression because we call it green light. It's wood-based systems is an essential part when we move from on-site to off-site building processes, as you were talking about. I think that's necessary in all European countries today. And green light is also part of a general solution that talks about and introduce industrial processes in construction sector. The truth is, and this is what the expert says, we can reduce carbon dioxide pollution by 50% now if we use well-known technology and processes. Today. Yeah. Today.
That's very important, of course. You know, we are looking for a lot of new technology that will come in 25 years. But with buildings, the technology we have, we just have to move to it.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important. And in some countries, they have been very fast. It took you 20 years to reach to 20%. In UK, it's going faster because they start after you, and we can go faster here too.
I think it's very easy to understand if you have a competition between concrete and wood. It's more difficult to talk systems amongst politicians or those who make the decisions. Because it's not a matter of material, it's all about logistics, processes and building systems. And the grey light, what does it represent? Well, high costs, strong climate pollutions, bad quality, well, and bad efficiency as well. That's the grey light problems. Well, a little expose about history in Europe when we increase use of wood, or at least tried to increase use of wood. It was actually started by Holland, or Netherlands as we says. They had a volume-based goal that was taken in a decision from the parliament. Increase use of wood by 20% in 10 years. Then Norway, they used another kind of strategy. They used demonstrators, big buildings in wood. And it started during the Winter Olympic Games in 1994 in Lillehammer, and especially the Viking ship arena, which at that point was one of the biggest construction in wood in the world. Indoor sports arena, I would say. And they fulfilled this achievement by an even bigger demonstrator. That's the Oslo International Airport, Gardermoen, which at that point was absolutely the biggest wooden construction in the world. And I compare it with the Eiffel Tower from here in Paris. What it did for steel construction, you have the equivalent in Gardermoen. In 2000, Finland, they had a big company, multi-store company called Film Forest. They started sort of European tour, went all over in Britain, in France, Italy, Austria, and everywhere, and they tried to implement more and more wood solutions. And they were quite successful at that point. And of course, 2020, you had President Macron here in France said that all new public buildings should be 50% out of timber. And as you said, 2020, because of the sun and other very important persons, reaches 20% in multi-story buildings. Top of European list, I would say. I show you a picture of Gardermoen because it was impressive at that point, and it's quite a big, bad photograph. But actually, these beams are 145 meters long and 4.2 meters high, and that sort of expanded the possibilities in wood at that point. And so, the Swedish example in short notice, we had a decision in Parliament in 2002. That's why you talk about 20 years. Yeah. That's absolutely correct. And to introduce a national wood building program.
Yeah.
And
always start by the government,
yeah. Absolutely. And it took the government actually 3 years to introduce such a program because, you know, and that was very important, I think, for our country, because you have to have sort of collaboration or cooperation with politicians to even change things. And it took 5 years to have the first conference about climate change connected to wood, and it was arranged by the Swedish government, and the concrete industry was absolutely furious at that conference. So it has probably it was very important because they were very angry at
Not working?
Hello? Yeah. 2010, yeah. We reaches 10% of multi-story buildings. And in 2014, I think Susanne will tell us a little bit more about that probably. It was a very important report about the process and the impact on the climate. Yeah. That changed the game plan in a way, because the process was more important than the house that isn't completed.
Yeah. So it means when you reach 20% of building, yeah, it means that a lot of companies and factories came up?
Absolutely.
Do you know how many maybe factories in Sweden now? Or?
I think Susanne can answer
Yes,
that
you can
question
answer that.
better than me. But I continue. I think that's one of my conclusions of these presentations. If you are going to have a game change, you have to have cooperation with the political system, and the political initiatives is very important. And you also need to follow and present research and its results. We have new facts, and that's very important, I think. I don't know if you remember this guy, but he was the Prime Minister of Sweden for 10 years. His name is Göran Persson. But if you don't remember this man, he said something important for us. He said it's time to use more wood when we build modern cities, because it has been forbidden for more than 100 years.
Amazing.
Yeah. But what did the government started at that point? Because the knowledge of how to build in wood and how to use industrial processes was very low. So we had a massive education program from 2005 and for the next 10 years, I would say. And it was directed to architects, politicians, engineers, and entrepreneurs. And we had a major tour of conferences around Sweden and also abroad, actually. And as we have here today, to present, I think that's very important. And of course, we have important projects. I just show you this one from the Stockholm area, which was erected in 2015. I know you have been there, Pascal.
I've been there, yes.
Yes, but that's not what was important about it. Was that the researchers said it was the lowest CO2 emissions in history for a multi-story building in Sweden. And at that, of course, the newspapers and media, they have something to write about, and that's important too. Because otherwise, we just, between experts, we have these conversations. You have to have support from the politicians, from people everywhere. So, multi-story houses, 20% of the market in Sweden today. I will just show you a few examples from the history. In the early examples, economy was dominating completely, of course. We didn't discuss climate change or anything. So we have to imitate concrete and steel buildings. But these particular houses outside of Stockholm is off-site produced in a factory and look like every other
normal house.
Yeah. And wood-based system we also imported from America. This is the on-site production of a wooden house in multi-stories, 2x4s, you probably know about. It was the biggest company of Sweden, Skanska, imported that from the United States and tried it for a couple of years in Sweden. But if we do it in a factory, it's not 30 weeks, it's 12 weeks. That's
only
the
12
difference.
weeks. How many houses?
Well, in this production from Limbex, as you probably know of, I think there are thousands of houses like that in Sweden today. I don't know, but it's very, very common. In Östersund, in the middle part of Sweden, a little bit more design and architecture. And of course, in the future, we will see even more fascinating examples. And Paris 2015, the International United Nations Agreement was very important because it introduces a new models for business, I think. Design and architecture. We have a project in Sweden called Timber on Top. When you erect new rings on top of houses, new floors, that's very interesting. And a new way, you don't have to build new streets, new areas, and use...
So here you get 3 stories
That's right.
Very good.
And a little bit more aesthetic roof, I would say, on this house. And you see the old house in the background with a flat top.
Lovely.
New technical solutions. When we industrialize the process, we will see even more technical solutions. Remains just one thing. Forest in Sweden produces every minute 2 houses like this in 5 stories. That's also an industrial
So there's
process.
enough wood.
Yeah. So that was my final slide. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Niklas. Je pense qu'on peut applaudir. Ce que je peux vous proposer, c'est quelques questions avant d'enchaîner avec Suzanne. Peut-être pas trop, mais si on a 2 ou 3 questions, c'est tout à fait accessible. Est-ce que vous avez des questions pour Niklas sur cette partie plutôt historique de comment on est passé finalement de la construction en béton à de la construction bois et industrialisée dans l'espace de 20 ans? Si vous préférez garder les questions pour la fin, on continue avec Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne. So, Suzanne, you are a managing director of a Swedish Wood Council. And so you are working now in the, timber construction, in all that stuff that Niklas explained to us. And how is it now?
Well, we have a tremendous development within the industrialized construction sector right now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that recent development.
Very
and
good.
I also must say it's a great honor to be here in Paris and in France, where so much exciting development takes place right now.
It's a great honor for us to have you here. Well, so let's go.
Let's go. So changing to wood from concrete is not just, as you have heard, something about a material choice or choice of material. It's rather about implementing a new business structure and a new business ideology. So I'm the managing director for the Swedish Wood Building Council. With the, as I mentioned, the really strong growth within the industry right now. There is a strong push, of course, for climate reasons, but also a really strong need for changing and renewing the construction industry. There is a growing interest from builders all around the country, and interest from actually all around the world on this new way of building and producing homes.
You have a lot of visits from all over Europe and all over the world.
We have indeed.
You had some few weeks ago with a French group, a European group?
Yes, we had a European group of public housing companies from all over Europe that came to Malmö in the south of Sweden to discuss and to look on how to build a sustainable new future. As I said, the biggest driver is, of course, the urgent need for decreasing the climate impact from the construction sector. Building in wood and substituting other materials with timber is a fast track towards the climate goal of climate neutrality. But also the need for vitalization of the construction industry and the performance and its productivity is an equally strong driver. And I start by sharing an image from the tallest building in Sweden, the very same that Pascal just showed you. It's actually among the biggest in the world currently. The cultural center up in the north, it's 20 stories at 84 meters high building in CLT. It holds a concert hall, a library, an office space, some restaurants, and a hotel. And it's especially interesting for this conference since the construction actually also is a combination of load-bearing panels in CLT and prefabricated volumes in CLT that was ready-made off-site and transported into site the bathrooms, pods, and interior all mounted. And here is actually a picture from the mounting of the hotel rooms that I mentioned. And as Niklas just also showed you, the very same picture, there are high expectations for the timber industry. So when the president mentioned this a couple of years ago, we were in the timber industry, of course, was very happy. But again, it's not just about changing the material, it's about introducing the process. And as perhaps Niklas also have talked about, the industrialized construction industry is to a great extent based on wood building systems and therefore tightly connected to the wood construction industry. So in order to speak about the development, that we have to start in the woods. So Sweden is one of the most forest-covered countries in Europe, with a forest cover of approximately 70%, corresponding to forest availability of wood supply of 23 million hectares. And Sweden is the third largest exporter of sawn timber globally. Half of its production is exported to within Europe and the rest to Middle East and Asia. And the UK is the single biggest market. And the forests in Sweden are, of course, the most important natural resource and has a central role in the ecologically sustainable society. The utilization of forest resource must occur in a manner that maintains both productivity and biodiversity. All forests in Sweden is sustainable managed. To make it simple, when we cut a tree, we make sure to plant at least 3 new ones. This, of course, also makes a good long-term business sense. And in its approach that has been strengthened in the recent years by the introduction of the most up-to-date forest management method using satellite technology and other modern information systems for harvesting. And the sawmill industry, as I mentioned, has been largely focusing on export of raw material. Focus has been on large volumes of sawn timbers to overseas markets. But the demand from the emerging wood building industry is growing, and we see that the sawmill industry now is trying to integrate forward into the construction industry. And of course, wood is our oldest construction material. We have many examples of old houses from the 11th century and still in use. I also have a short history because the first prefabricated wooden pavilions were made in 1830 by the architect Fredrik Blom for King Carl XIV Johan, also known as Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who was French and later became the king. And these pavilions were actually exported to Russia and to Poland and also to France. So we have a history of prefabrication and industrialization of single-family housing with quite great number of housing factories all over the country. And building tall buildings, more than 2-story, were banned during almost 100 years. So that's a relatively new development. It took off, as Niklas just mentioned, when we became members of the European Union. So why wood in construction? Of course, the process, manufacturing, technology, quality assurance, continuous improvements, experience feedback, but also building systems, prefabricated, standardized, configurable, flexible, easy transportation, fast assembly. And wood lend itself to all of this. And now, of course, we also have the environmental and climate benefits, reusable, recyclable, and renewable.
Maybe, Suzanne, you are speaking about continuous improvement.
Yes.
That's something we can do in the factory. It's very difficult to have on site. on the building construction traditionally. And I heard that there is a study in the University of Luleå with Professor Lars Stern, who is saying that the factories,
Yes.
they are studying for 6, 7 years or something, and on this period of a few years, they improve the productivity of 30%. Is that true?
That's true. We made this story. I mean, you showed very good examples on productivity and the kind of crocodile mouth where traditional production goes in one way and the construction on the other way. And of course, we made this study in order to explore how the industrialized wood-based sector is doing. And we have got these good figures, actually. And our ambitions now to continue this study and to also make sure that we can produce some kind of index and also data for the companies to use in order to improve.
So we are very interested to get this study.
The study will be published in English really soon. I was hoping that we're going to have it for this show, but it's not published yet. But
So it's really amazing. 30%, 30% d'amélioration de productivité en quelques années, parce qu'on a compris la logique industrielle. Et donc là, bien sûr, les usines, elles peuvent produire des produits de qualité à des prix accessibles pour le marché.
Yes, finally some numbers then for the wood construction in Sweden today. As mentioned, 20% of the multi-story housing, 90% of the single-family housing market, and a growing market share for other buildings. Other buildings tend to combine other materials, so it's quite hard to get some accurate market share for those, but we're trying to find out on how to measure. We have a wide presence at leading universities. Municipalities are developing their knowledge through wood building strategies. And it looks good for 2022. 2023 is another story. Perhaps we're facing some a little bit harder times, but still we have the structural change ongoing. So I'm quite positive anyway. And we have some 15 producers of timber building systems in factories. And that's what you asked before.
Yes. With very big factories. Lindbäcks, for instance, is about 500 guys in the factory or something.
Yes, and Swedish companies has been investing 5 billion Swedish crowns.
In the
How much
factories.
is that? 500 million. Thank you.
500 million euro in new factories.
During the last.
Do you know how many employees all these 15 factories, for instance?
Sorry.
The employees.
Actually, I don't have the numbers. As you know, it's not one-to-one.
Yeah.
You cannot compare them to the construction sector because it's perhaps 1 to 0.7 or something like that.
Okay.
15,000 could it be?
15,000.
Yeah, some around that.
Quite a lot.
Around that number. We have also investments in CLT production from the sawmill industry, where 4 companies now are producing CLT. They have just inaugurated new factories and ramping up their production capacity. Yes, and as I mentioned, big investments in new production capacity just being realized.
Very good.
But as you know, it's not just to push the button. It takes time to get the system working together and get the full potential flowing. And we also see some which is I find especially interesting, some new suppliers of timber building system are entering the market. So there are new players also entering. And we also see that the big entrepreneurs are starting to take on wood projects, and we need to help them and support them in that. Yes, the concrete guys are now also doing timber projects due to actually the market is there. They need to for business reasons. And of course, we also have a very interesting architecture. The architects are really good drivers here. We have great variation of products throughout the country and some really interesting projects going on. get my manuscript back. And still, the last bullet, I think it's important. We still have a strong political push. But we see that now the trend is rather towards climate neutrality, not perhaps wood precisely, but climate neutrality, where wood is rather not the strategy, but the methods of reaching the climate neutrality. So what is industrialized construction? I think I go through this really quick because you had a really good slide on that. But standardized processes, repeatable processes, focus on waste, focus on faults and mistakes, learning processes, and developed and sophisticated supply chain. And again, industrialized construction is how you build, not what you build. And some examples, terraced houses with volumetric elements in south of Stockholm, and 5-story buildings, the volumetric element in Gothenburg. And we also see that it's not just housing. So the interest for industrialized off-site construction is also spreading to other categories. And of course, the possibilities on circular use, where we use existing building, a timber on top project. This is an old factory from 1930s with 4 stories on top, all done with prefabricated wall and panels with a really quick and fast assembly on site, small cranes. And that, of course, it's also an important driver for prefabrication. When we build where people already live and go to school and live, yeah, then this is a good opportunity. And finally, perhaps the most important building in Sweden. This is not the tallest building. It's actually a quite small building. It's a kindergarten in Gothenburg, and it's called the Hope. And the city of Gothenburg that has built it. And it's a fossil-free kindergarten. And when they set out to do this project some 5 years ago, or 6 perhaps, it seems like utopia, almost as a utopic project as the cultural center. But now they have done it, and it's quite near. It's not 100% fossil-free, but quite close.
Amazing.
So the learning from this, and it's also, of course, done with prefabricated systems and elements.
Very good. And Suzanne, with this productivity you increase in the factories, can you confirm that price is able to get down for the price of housing, and also the quality is coming up? We have a good example with Colloque, for instance, and also with Combohus. So it's 2 experience in Sweden. Colloque is from IKEA and Skanska. And so they are building now some houses 25% cheaper than the market.
Actually, I can confirm that the quality has gone up. I can also confirm that the cost has come down. It varies, it's company to company, but the prices have perhaps not come down. We have been through a tremendous hot market, so there is actually no reason to deal with prices. But you can never, of course, lower your price if you cannot keep control of your cost. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, very good.
The quality is there, so it's value for money anyway.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Suzanne.
Thank you.
So, shall we go to Michael? So, Michael, you are in this world of building for years. And 2 years ago or something, you decided to create a company to prefab modular buildings.
I actually joined an existing company, but I joined it as CEO. It was about a year ago or something like that.
Okay.
A bit more than a year ago.
And so, well,
but it was a startup, so in that sense, it's correct.
Good. And so, well, it's really interesting for us to share your experience You started with this company, which was a startup, and grow up. And but how was it going? And what you have done to improve productivity and to have a good product to bring on the market?
Yeah, I will share some of that. I will start with another angle, though. Despite all those good examples that Niklas showed us about how prefabricated construction could look like, I think most people still believe that this is industrial construction. They think about the sort of run-down suburb somewhere with not that well-managed houses some 40, 50 years ago. That's what people envision when they think about industrial construction. But this is not what we should talk about today, I think. It's difficult for me to sit down when I'm speaking, but I'll try anyway. Because industrial construction has nothing to do with the aesthetics. It has only to do with the processes and the standardized methods and the repeating and the continuous improvement. That is what it is about, not the aesthetics. Just a couple of words about myself. I used to be a McKinsey consultant. After that, I ended up as a line manager. I was CEO of a relatively big construction company, real estate owner in Stockholm. I wrote a book called The Inefficient Construction Industry, An Agenda for Renewal, which was quite famous, quite well known in Sweden. Not very well known, obviously, outside of Sweden, since it's in Swedish. But I was very much in that book arguing for industrialized construction. And then I joined this company a bit more than a year ago, something like that. When we talk about productivity decrease or low productivity in the construction sector, we must remember that we are actually talking about people. We are talking about people that cannot meet their housing needs because of the shortage in the housing market. If we take the Swedish example, I know this is relevant for many countries. If we take this example, there is a housing shortage in 240 municipalities out of 300 or so, but only production in about 100. Because it doesn't matter if you get the land for free in the other municipalities, you still cannot afford to build because the costs are too high. And that is driven by the cost increases. You can see that on the left-hand side. With an index of 100 in 1999, you can see construction cost in Stockholm or rest of Sweden compared to consumer price index and production price index. Massive cost increase in construction compared to all other industries. And also, as you showed, productivity numbers, which are even decreasing, while all the other industries more or less are doubling their productivity over the last 20 years. And things are not getting better, because what we have now is a substantial material price index due to the cost increases from post-COVID and from the war in Ukraine. So wood increased by some 50% over the last year, metal pipes some 50%, gypsum some 40%, etc., etc. If this continues, people cannot afford to buy their houses. And that is not only a Swedish problem. We also need to think about why is the productivity low? Because there are inefficiencies in production. A number of studies show that about 20% of the construction cost is related to correcting faults in the production in traditional construction. 20% of the construction cost, a massive number. If we look at the share of time by a normal construction worker, 1.5 days per week is waste. Doing things again which they did wrong the day before, waiting for material to come, waiting for another group of construction workers to be done, etc., etc. And this we will continue to see as long as we consider that each project is unique. Because if each project is unique, we're doing things for the first time, every time. And then we don't learn. And if we don't learn, how could we improve? then we will always find those things that are not thought through in the process, that are not well prepared, which will make the whole process to stumble. And as said, not only a Swedish problem, McKinsey estimates that about 2 trillion, 1.6 trillion US dollars, it's such a big number, so I don't even know what to relate it to, is lost economic value due to the productivity gap in the construction sector. I believe the recipe for improvement is first and foremost about industrialization, not necessarily on or off-site, not necessarily wood or any other material, but doing it in an industrial way, having standardized processes, as mentioned before, and having a continuous improvement, repeating what you're doing. If you have an industrialized process, then you can start to attack waste. Then you can rethink the supply chain and do what the manufacturing industry is doing in terms of value creating partnerships with the suppliers. You can start to digitalize because you can always improve the digitalization as well, and you can start to challenge structures. This is a picture from our factory. We were trying to do exactly this, manufacturing high quality housing with large variation. We want to be a part of the solution to the housing challenge. Make sure that more people can meet their unmet housing needs. I want you to look at two things on this picture. One being the cross-laminated timber, which is the structure of our building system. It's a fantastic material if you want to industrialize, because it's exact, it is CO2, very good from a CO2 perspective, and it's very good when you transport the ready-made volumes out to the site. Secondly, none of the modules or volume elements that we prefer to call it, none of them is similar to any other ones. They are all unique. But the components are always the same. So even if we have unique volume elements, in order to make sure that every land spot can be filled, the components and the way people are working in the factory is always the same. It's the same type of windows, it's the same way that you fit the windows to the cross-laminated wood. It is the same supplier of kitchen, it is the same type of bathrooms, it is the same type of floors. All the elements are the same, but they vary in length and they vary in the other dimension.
Wide.
Thank you. And the way they are configured could vary. And we build 5 to 8 stories, multi-apartment, multi-story buildings. And this relates to one of the important things, I think, in terms of industrialized construction. You need to define what is your pieces of Lego. We defined it, as I said, as the components. But you could have a strategy if you are a traditional construction company where all screws and bolts and whatever it's called, gypsum boards, etc., are the Lego components and could vary from construction project to construction project. Or you could have modular houses, and there is nothing wrong with modular houses, where you have maybe 5 or 10 standardized modules, which are always the same, and then you construct the houses by how you combine those modules. Or you could be somewhere in between, which we are. You just have to define your way you have to define your pieces of Lego. I said I told you how we defined it, and these are some examples from photos from our factory. And the picture to the right is the final product when it leaves the factory. It has kitchen, it has floor, it has all the installations related to the actual volume element. And then you connect it on site. You assemble it on site, you build the facade, you build the roof. And you obviously also install all the installations related to the house, so the solar panels or whatever. This means that despite standardization, there is a large variation in form. So all these examples are based of the same manufacturing standards, the same production system, but it looks very different. It could look even more different if you would like it to. What did we achieve? We actually achieved those 30%, Pascal, but we achieved it in 1.5 years.
It's very fast.
Does this work? These are run out.
Okay.
Maybe this one was much better. So we achieved the productivity increase by 30% in our factory. We achieved the material cost reduction of €200 per square meter living area. That's about 10% of the cost for the customer when they actually buy the house. I must say, though, that this is assuming flat material prices. Since the material prices went up so much, the final material cost didn't go down by this number. But had the prices been flat, it would have went down with that number. And we have very much detailed the planning for the site work down to half hours. About 6 months is what it takes for a complete project. Most of it is planned in half hours in order to increase the same efficiency on site as in factory. And what does that mean? And why have we achieved all this? Because we have had the continuous improvement loops. Yeah. After the first project, we changed a number of things in terms of the installation shafts. So those look different in the coming projects. And we take those learnings and bring them to the next project and the project after that. The way we connect the modules on site is something that we also changed. That also increased the productivity both in the factory and on site, and it took down the material cost as well. So a number of things where we went through our product, improved it from project to project, helped us improve those things. But there is a flip side as well. There is always a flip side, right? Otherwise there won't be any presentation. So in what senses have we failed? Because we have also failed. Material cost has increased a lot. That means that inflation is going up. If inflation is going up, interest rates are going up significantly. If interest rates are going up, real estate values are plummeting. Our key owner, which happened to be our key customer, decided to change their strategy and decided to not build any more residential houses. That is a problem if you are owned by such a company and if you have that company as a key client. That has made us going into quite some turmoil. Despite that, I'm very proud of what we have achieved. 4 key learnings then. 2 more slides and some questions perhaps. First, as I said, find your way to standardize, build your production system, define your pieces of Lego. I think that is crucial. Secondly, involve with the client at a very early stage, because you have to redefine perhaps their project idea to fit with your production system. If you don't do that, costs will not be as good as they could be. So be deeply involved with the client at an early stage. Thirdly, avoid doing everything for everyone. If someone is coming up with a project which just doesn't fit your production system, unless there is something completely wrong with your production system, then you should obviously change it. But then you should change that. You should just not alter it because someone is coming with a project. So avoid doing everything for everyone. Find your projects that fits with your production system and with your strategy. and aim high on efficiency and work on that continuous improvement. The additional learning, make sure that you have owners with sufficient stamina. Typically, I'm concluding presentations with this cartoon. I think it shows quite well what we want to achieve, right? We know that there is the best view is from the top of the mountain. We know that the path there is very complex. We know that we will stumble, but we will rise again, stumble again, and rise again. We should still take that path, because otherwise we won't reach the top. Although it's so much easier to take the simple, follow the crowd with a simple road, but that will just lead you to the cliff.
Je pense qu'on peut applaudir. Michael. So, thank you very much, all of you. And I think maybe we can have some questions now, before we start the second part. Est-ce que c'est OK pour vous? Quelques questions à nos amis suédois? J'imagine que oui, mais la première, c'est toujours la plus difficile. Pardon? Oui, oui, vous pouvez bien sûr poser des questions en français. On va traduire. Donc vous avez vu cette notion d'industrialisation, de standardisation qui permet l'amélioration continue et qui va permettre toutes ces améliorations, l'amélioration de productivité, etc., etc. Donc ça tient vraiment à cette notion d'industrialisation, de standardisation qu'il faut bien sûr bien comprendre. Wayne.
I'm not sure this is allowed, if I'm allowed to ask questions of a panel, but it might be good learnings for France. It's certainly going to be, it's a hurdle for the UK, so I imagine France have a similar hurdle. I was really interested, once you're getting to the higher volumes or higher stories with timber construction, whether it be timber, CLT, etc., how, because I imagine yourselves have been involved in the conversations with political figures, warranty, insurance, building control advisors. How did you overcome the fear and in the UK, very, very tentative nervousness around using timber for taller buildings? And I'm genuinely asking because we have this problem now, which I'm struggling to overcome.
Suzanne?
Actually, in Sweden, there are no limits. You can build as high as you wish. So it's rather the technical systems that sets the limits. We have a continuous dialogue with the insurance industry and policymakers. And up until now, there are questions always, especially regarding fire, but also moist, other technical stuff. So I would say it's the continuous dialogue that is the...
Is it based on precedents that you maybe don't have a lot of fires, or is it because you do a lot of active testing to show that you don't get fires? How have you overcome that in terms of, I'm sure you're not waiting for the really bad fire and then you'll do testing after. You must have done something to
no,
calm
of course, you have to comply. And I mean, fire was the first thing that the timber industry had to solve in order for this development to take off. So, and also means that regardless material, we have the same building codes. So it's not material-based, it's function-based. And you would just have to demonstrate on how you use those, or how you fulfill the code.
I think the biggest issue is not with insurance companies and so on. It's more with actually real estate owners, because the insurance companies, they trust the building codes, and the building codes are defined also for how, you should have if you have wood, you should have one or two gypsum boards or whatever, right? And as long as you comply with that, then you get your sort of insurance license. It's possible to insure the actual house. But it's more actually the owners of the rental house owners, long-term real estate owners, who want to make sure that the house is fine, and they are afraid of fire, they are afraid of humidity. That's the second thing. In our case, I think the cross-laminated timber is a good, that has been a good selling point, because cross-laminated timber is as close to concrete as it could be, but still being wood. And in fact, it has about the same type of characteristics. If you get a wood, if you have a wood, if you have a humidity thing in a concrete building, you probably also need to take out a little bit of the top layer of the concrete. Because you have wood and floor on top of that, etc. So you need to. So I think that has been the key thing, to show that for us, cross-laminated timber is about the same as concrete.
I have quite a different answer to that question, because I think it's very interesting. I think we were a little bit lucky in Sweden from the start, because we had our biggest construction company invested in multi-story houses in Sweden. They are called Skanska, as we have mentioned before, and they had a great confidence in the market. And if they dared to build in this system, it was quite important at that point. I mean, from the start. And secondly, I would say we had projects continuously. There were always people who dared to walk the difficult way from the beginning. So it's a mixture and a little bit luck as well, I think.
Maybe I can add a little bit. So in Søndergaard Saint-Gobain, so we develop systems which are complementary to in wood buildings in many countries. And Sweden is a little bit different than many other European countries, because they have imposed a quality process on construction. So you have in Sweden the moisture experts, who basically make sure that your whole job site planning and so on is done right, so you can handle these bio-based materials. And you also have fire experts in Sweden, which is a completely different discipline than in many other countries. So I would say Sweden, contrary to many other countries, imposes rules and quality control on the process of construction, if it is on-site or off-site. So it's not completely by chance that you don't have so many accidents.
Thank you very much. Eline, une autre question peut-être? Ok, alors je vous propose donc de changer d'équipe. Speaker, so we have to change speakers. Thanks very much, Niklas. We can applaud you, of course. Thanks very much, Suzanne. Thanks very much, Michael. It was great to listen to you and to share your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm welcoming Wayne Hill. Please, Wayne. So Wayne is coming from UK in a company called L&Q. L&Q is social landlords, and it's quite a huge company. You are building a lot of housing.
Yeah.
And you came in what you call the journey to innovation in construction, I think 4 or 5 years ago or something?
Yeah. We're about 5 years into our roadmap.
5 years. Yeah. And so I've seen you already a few times, and I love the way of your company is going nicely and quietly to off-site, and more every year. And it's really amazing to understand that. And Eline is from Saint-Gobain. And Eline is responsible for all over the world in the industry of construction, supplying materials to lot of industry in the world for construction, a lot of kind of construction, industrialized construction. So welcome together. It's very nice to have you here. And well, we start by Wayne. Wayne, can you explain the journey you have made with Offsite?
Okay, so thank you firstly for inviting me along today. It's wonderful, and it was good to be in the audience for the first part, because not being on stage means I could take lots of notes, and I was very keen to hear everything from the Swedish market and how they're progressing. It's certainly a market which I myself have looked at quite a lot historically, and in many respects it's informed quite a lot of the works that we have taken on. The work started for myself about 10 years ago. I changed over from being an architect. Similar, I did a research paper. I was asked to publish it. I decided there was some very valuable information in my research paper, so I decided not to publish it in the end. And I thought it would be better to use it for my forthcoming career. And so with that, it was part of understanding the problem, as I call it, of why can't we switch, or why in the UK couldn't we switch? What were we getting wrong? The UK has tried to use offsite now for 50, 60 years. And every time it gives up after about 5 years because it fails really poorly at it. So I decided, I was very frustrated, I would understand it better, and then I would use that information to help the market improve and apply some intelligence. And yes, I did look at Sweden back then, I will say, and I did meet with Colloque as well. Okay, so before I start, I'm actually going to pick up from the last one, which is that my presentation picks up in favor that you've already decided that offsite is a good thing to do. So you understand about productivity increases, you understand about quality improvements. Mine doesn't look at that at all. You're going on that journey. What I want to show today is how we then, having made that decision as a business, decided to approach that journey and what steps we took. Very similar to the last conversation, actually, which is that we first talked to the business and those around us that if you want to use offsite manufacturing, you need to first understand that you are treating your home as a product and you are trying to align to a manufacturing process. You're not looking at a building principle anymore. And so with that, you first have to understand, like iPhones or Apple do, or BMW, you have to understand what products you're making first. That's part of the last presentation. You also need to understand how you want to address your developing of your homes or your flats or whatever you're building as a product. And the reason we said this to our board is because there's always an urgency to go to offsite technologies in 1 or 2 years. Now, I know from my first hand of working with Dyson in a previous life, that they spend 5 or 6 years developing a product before it gets to the market. And why are we in construction trying to get to a solution of using manufacturing in 2 years or 1 year? There's a reason why Dyson take 5 years. There's a reason why Apple take 5 years. If you think you're smarter than they are, you're going to fail every time. So that's a starting point. Admit you don't know as much as they do, and you'll need time to develop and understand what you're doing. And with that, you then have to understand that it's not a binary problem as per the last presentation. It's not all offsite or all traditional. There are different combinations with different types of markets. The UK is different to Japan, is different to Sweden. And the UK, the first thing we had to understand is what was our right level of offsite construction. Similar to Pascal's presentation, where you have 3 pillars of successful production, not for homes, but actually for a product, any product, your phone, your trainers, your tie. You need repetition, you need volume, and you need to choose the right typology, the right material or system for what you're building. Pascal already looked at DFMA, which is about designing so that it's good for manufacturing. The one we always use in our company is cars and watches, as an example. So these are 2 cars you can buy, the BMW 4 Series, and if you're really lucky, I think you're lucky if you get the 4 Series, but if you're really, really lucky, you can get the Lamborghini Aventador, if life is so kind to you. Now, what's interesting is the way these 2 cars are made. The BMW 4 Series produces, in the US alone, 40,000 units. And pretty much about 70% to 80% is put together by machines. Interestingly, still 20 to 30% is still put together by hand or fixed by hand. People forget this. When we talk about construction using off-site and manufacturing, we think every part should come together off-site. It shouldn't. Cars don't. And they've been doing this for 100 years. Again, we're not smarter than Henry Ford. You know, they've had a 100-year head start and they've got to 70%. The Lamborghini Aventador, by comparison, is all done, put together. All the components are built by machines, but it's put together by hand. And the reason is simple. If you have 100 units that you're going to build, it is cheaper and quicker to put them together by hand than set up machines to produce 100 units. And we say this all the time. If you do not have the volume, we genuinely recommend people don't use off-site for the moment until others can produce more volume for you. And where we are in the UK right now, if you try to put 100 homes through an off-site factory, it will cost you longer, more time, and be less efficient than if you build it traditionally. It's a tough lesson, but it's one that we always say. And that's why sometimes, certainly what myself and my team have been saying is different to others in our sector. And I'll give you some examples of where we've made mistakes as an industry and in the UK in our journey. First, I want to talk a little bit about the approach we took. The first thing wasn't just to start solving it. We set up a team, and the team had to come up with a strategy and put a plan in place. We had to understand from our company what homes we built, because we asked the company, and we got told we build houses and we build flats. Then we found out we build private rented flats. And then we found out we built houses for people who are elderly and need care homes. It turns out our company didn't know what homes they built. So the first thing we had to do, again, our naivety compared, at the board at Apple, if they didn't know what products they were making and who they were selling to, they'd be sacked. The construction industry can get that far without knowing what they actually do. We use this information and other information we put together to form a roadmap. And then probably the third largest part about this is the culture journey that you need to take in your businesses and in your country. 50% of the work that we do every year is cultural work. To get traction, to get buy-in, to get people to change, you have to do a lot of work with persuasion with people. It's naive to think that it doesn't take that long to change. The change management is really difficult. A great idea can fall really quickly if you don't get buy-in and you don't get enough people enthusiastic about what you're doing and understanding what you're doing. I've lost the clicker.
Big one.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I'm pressing the lights. Okay, so what I did in our business, Pascal alluded to it. So L&Q have 100,000 homes that we own and rent out for social housing. We roughly house about 250,000 people. So it's the city the size of Nottingham we manage on a daily basis. And we build, though, very unique for a housing association in the UK, we build about 3,000 to 3,500 homes. So it doesn't sound a lot, but actually puts us in the top 10 in the UK. So it's a very unique position. So what I said to them, for that scale, we couldn't just have one or two people solving it. We all need to put together a team that starts to look like the manufacturing sector. So I have half my team separated into product development, and the other half is fed into or develops our product delivery. This is starting to look a bit more now like manufacturing. I don't have traditional architects or buyers or technical or construction. Now we're starting to look at, I've got digital, I've got innovation, I've got specification manager, which is very rare in housing or in construction. I've got my sales and marketing feeding in, telling me what we need to actually design. I've got my construction and my construction health and safety teams. So we're taking them on the journey as well because they need to change. And I've got a frameworks team doing my buying. In your country, you need to understand what your market is and what your challenges are. We are very simple. We're doing low density, traditional UK housing and flatted developments, mid, high rise. You have to understand who your customers are, how they live is very different. And you have to understand what your market is already like in the country, what capacity you have to build off-site and what might need to be invested in. And it was here before I go to the roadmap, and see if it'll let me go back. No, I can only go forward. It's okay. Oh, I can. This is one of the first examples I'm going to give of the why the journey can be dangerous. On the first one, I said, you need to first understand what you're building before you decide how you're going to design it. And that's very similar to what someone else has said. We were involved in a collaborative project with the London Mayor's Office, and they were sponsoring a design offsite app. And we were going to help fund and give some intellectual guidance. And one of the pushes was to build 3 or 4 factories very quickly to give output to match this new demand. And the first thing I said to them was, do you know yet what's going to be built? And of course they were, well, yeah, maybe we do. So I told them first to spend 3 months doing market research, and they used all the planning applications that had been received by the London various neighborhoods, put them together and created a heat map. And over the next 5 years, what they found was that the most common type of building was going to be somewhere around 25 stories. Not 6 months before, someone who was advising the Mayor's Office and others around the UK, I won't name the name, I'll tell you later, had lobbied a large investment firm who do insurances and mortgages and other funds in the housing market to build a huge off-site factory, because he told them that all this demand was going to come through, build a factory and the orders will come. The output of this factory was not suitable to build buildings as high as 25 stories. They've essentially built a dead factory. Yeah, there is some demand for it, but not to the level of which they were told. And the two just didn't join up. They didn't think about the problem before they started developing. That company announced this week that they've made losses in 5 years of £173 million. So, yes, it's a really great journey to go on, but get it right. If you get it wrong, it is brutal. And the worst is it can do more damage, because the wrong solution will give everyone the nervousness and think that offsite is the wrong solution. It's not. It's just the wrong solution and the wrong offsite for the wrong type of home. So thinking and planning, when I joined, my company wanted to go very fast. I said, let's spend 18 months thinking about it first. We will be ahead when we start because we'll have the right answer. Apple say it is better to be right than to be first. And that 173 million is a good example of that. They were the first factory in the UK. They will unfortunately not probably survive. Our roadmap then is 10 years. Everyone was scared of 10, but 10 years. 10 years is not a long time if it succeeds. 10 years is a long time if it fails. 2 years roadmap that fails every time is no use to anyone. A 10-year roadmap that works is better to the whole sector. We have a lot of people now using this methodology around the UK and adapting their plans. Ours is very simple. First year for May, design and understand what you're doing, design it. Then incrementally, we will increase the amount of offsite we use on each scheme over the kind of further 7 years. And the reason is our company has 2,500 people in it. We have to take them on that journey. I already know what year 10 looks like, but I can't use it today because it will fail. Kodak knew and had digital technology for cameras before anyone. But moving from analog film to digital, and they wanted to do it quickly, failed hard. So there's a lesson there. Small incremental changes are better than large, particularly for a large organization that's very set in its ways. And so here we are on the journey. We have created our first designs. We've now created our first standard products. And we use these products across all of our sites. So the rule is not that we design one scheme at a time. We design a set of subcomponents and parts, and they're used across all of our schemes. And that gives us the volume and the repetition, one site at a time, seldom. We've got some large sites, very large sites. But if we really want value and efficiency, we need to use all the sites, our whole capacity. So we've now created standard bathroom pods, balconies. These are the prototypes that from a couple of years ago. These are now being designed into our schemes. We've got frameworks in place for these. So these will now be orders. These are L&Q products, specific to our company. And we can use this on any job. We've tested them. We've done extensive quality tests, much further than construction quality. We've done, because we hold our products for 50, 100 years, we've actually done tests for how do you maintain it after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? How do you get the bath out of a bathroom? How will you get that out? What walls have to be destroyed? We accept they'll have to be destroyed, but which ones? So we can design a product that actually reduces the maintenance of all of our homes and makes our residents' lives a lot better in the long term. We produced a pattern book of houses for our works outside of the cities. And we've now already started building them. Those are our first sites. So whilst it seemed a long journey, the 10-year roadmap, after 3 years, we now have 100% of all of our homes are now built using timber offsite, and 100%, which gets us to about 50 or 60% offsite on those homes. They will increase over time. And our flats, our high-rise, is now about 25% and will be increasing to 50% in the next couple of years. So in actually 5 years, we switched one of the 7th largest house builder in the UK from completely traditional to now a point where every single one of our schemes has offsite on. And it's just a demonstration. Internally, our reputation as a team is that we are ambitious but cautious. And that's a really good way to approach this problem. It really, we're one of the only companies that had that level of success. We've seen a lot, unfortunately, had quite a lot of failure, trying to get too much too quickly, a sense of urgency. Really be cautious, but be positive about it and be ambitious about what you're trying to achieve. We also spent time collaborating. We don't think that we can solve it on our own, and hence why I was busy taking notes last time. I'm always learning, and we're always learning. We now are quite a leading team in the UK, but we always want to be better. We did a collaborative piece with the London Mayor's Office. We did a huge research piece which finished this year. 3 years it took us, and it was to look at